Winter came to Blackridge without warning, the way grief often does, sudden, relentless, and uninterested in mercy. One night the wind merely whispered through the trees, and by morning it screamed with such fury that even the mountains seemed to bow beneath it. Snow swallowed the paths Clara had learned by heart, burying fences and turning familiar landmarks into ghostly shapes beneath white drifts. The world beyond the ranch vanished completely, as if Blackridge had been cut loose from time itself. Isolation, once uncomfortable, became absolute. And in that isolation, truths long buried began to surface. Clara felt it in the way Elias moved through the house now, slower, heavier, as though winter had settled not only on the land but inside his chest. He spoke less than ever, retreating into himself as the days grew shorter and the nights stretched endlessly long. Yet he no longer shut her out entirely. When she spoke, he listened. When she worked, he watched, not with suspicion, but with something closer to trust, though neither of them would have named it that way. As the storms stacked one upon another, Clara began to notice the patterns of Elias's pain. Certain dates weighed heavier on him. Certain rooms he avoided unless necessary. The bedroom at the far end of the hall remained locked, its door untouched, its silence louder than any sound in the house. One evening, as she folded laundry by the fire, Clara asked softly, "How long has it been?" Elias did not answer right away. The fire cracked and shifted, throwing shadows across his face. "Long enough," he said at last. It wasn't an answer, but it was the closest thing to one he had ever given her. She nodded, accepting the offering for what it was. Clara had learned that healing didn't begin with questions, it began with patience. The mountain tested them both. Supplies dwindled. The cold gnawed at Clara's joints, and the wind stripped heat from her body faster than she could replace it. Still, she rose before dawn each morning, wrapped in layers, breath puffing white into the dark as she tended animals and cleared snow. Elias worked beside her now, no longer assigning tasks from a distance. They moved in silence, two figures carved from the same hardship, bound by necessity and something deeper neither dared name. At night, Clara cooked considering the limited provisions, stretching meals with ingenuity born of past poverty. Elias noticed. He said nothing, but he always ate every bite. Once, she caught him watching her with an expression that startled her, not hardness, not suspicion, but gratitude restrained by fear. It was during the third major storm of the season that everything changed. The wind howled for 2 straight days, shaking the house as if trying to tear it from the mountain. Snow piled so high against the doors that escape became impossible. On the second night, Clara heard a heavy thud from the porch, followed by nothing. No footsteps. No movement. A sick feeling twisted in her stomach. She grabbed her coat and forced the door open against the wind. Elias lay collapsed in the snow, his face pale, his body burning with fever. Panic surged through her, sharp and absolute. She dragged him inside inch by inch, her muscles screaming as she pulled his weight across the threshold. She did not stop to think. There was no time for fear. Only action. For 3 days and nights, Clara stayed by his side. She cooled his burning skin with damp cloths, forced water past cracked lips, whispered encouragement even when he could not hear it. The fever stole his strength and stripped away the walls he had spent years building. In delirium, he spoke names he never said aloud. He begged forgiveness from voices that were no longer there. Clara listened, heart aching, understanding at last the depth of the wound he carried. This was not a cruel man. This was a man frozen in the moment his life shattered, surviving only because the mountain demanded it. When Elias finally opened his eyes, the storm had passed, and sunlight filtered weakly through frost-covered windows. He saw Clara sitting there, exhausted, eyes rimmed red from sleeplessness. His voice broke when he spoke. "Why didn't you leave?" he whispered. Clara swallowed the lump in her throat. "Because this ranch doesn't need another ghost," she said. "And neither do you." From that moment, something fundamental shifted. Elias did not recover quickly, but he recovered differently. He no longer pretended he was unbreakable. He accepted help without anger. He spoke in longer sentences. He even allowed silence to exist without weaponizing it. One afternoon, as Clara repaired a torn coat, Elias unlocked the door at the end of the hall. He stood there for a long moment before stepping aside. Inside was a room preserved in time, a cradle near the window, a folded blanket, tiny shoes that had never touched the ground. Clara felt tears sting her eyes, but she did not speak. Elias's voice trembled. "I thought if I never opened the door, it wouldn't be real," he said. Clara looked at him gently. "Pain doesn't disappear when you lock it away," she replied. "It just waits." He nodded, as though hearing a truth he had always known but never dared accept. As winter began its slow retreat, Blackridge changed. The ranch felt less like a fortress and more like a home waking from a long sleep. Elias laughed once, softly, unexpectedly, when Clara burned a loaf of bread and pretended it was intentional. The sound startled them both. He covered it quickly, embarrassed, but Clara smiled as if she had witnessed something sacred. The valley noticed, too. Smoke rose from the chimney more often. The animals looked healthier. Light lingered longer in the windows at night. People whispered, unsure whether to believe what they saw. Places can still be healed. As the last heavy snows melted and thin green life pushed stubbornly through the hardened soil, Clara felt something inside herself shift as well. The mountain no longer felt like an enemy she had to survive, it felt like a witness to everything she and Elias had endured. Days grew longer, the light lingering in the valley as if reluctant to leave, and with it came a cautious sense of possibility. Neither of them spoke aloud. Elias worked again with strength returning to his limbs, but he no longer punished himself with exhaustion. He rested when his body demanded it. He listened when Clara spoke. And sometimes, when the workday ended, he would remain near her instead of retreating into solitude, as though silence no longer felt safe unless it was shared. Clara began to notice changes not only in Elias, but in the ranch itself. Repairs that had been delayed for years were finally completed. Fields long neglected were cleared and prepared. Elias even asked her opinion, quietly, almost awkwardly, about how to improve the property. The first time he did it, Clara had looked up from her work in surprise. "You don't have to do it my way," she said carefully. Elias shook his head. "I know," he replied. "But I trust your judgment." The words landed heavily, weighted with meaning. Trust was not something he gave lightly. Clara understood then that she was no longer merely an employee. She was part of the future he had once believed impossible. One afternoon, while sorting through old ledgers and papers in the storage room, Clara discovered something that made her pause. Deeds. Old maps. Correspondence addressed not only to Elias, but to a name she had never seen before, his wife's. The documents told a story. Elias stood silently for a long time before speaking. "I stayed here because I thought leaving would kill me," he said. "But staying almost did." Clara listened without interrupting. "You didn't fail by surviving," she said gently. "You just forgot you were allowed to live." Elias closed his eyes, absorbing the truth. When he opened them again, there were tears there, not of weakness, but release. Later that day, Elias did something that shocked even himself. He handed Clara a folded document and asked her to read it. It was a partnership agreement. Not charity. Not repayment. Recognition. "I don't want this ranch to be something that breaks people anymore," he said. "I want it to be something that keeps them." Clara's hands trembled as she held the paper. For the first time in her life, someone had offered her not just work, but belonging. "I'll stay," she said softly. "Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I choose this place." Elias smiled, small and uncertain, but real. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, they stood together on the porch, watching the light fade. The mountain was quiet, not empty, not threatening, but peaceful. Clara realized that Blackridge had never been cursed. It had simply been waiting for someone brave enough to see what lay beneath the pain. Elias turned to her and spoke words no one had ever expected to hear from the cruel mountain man. "You didn't save this ranch," he said. "You reminded me that it was worth saving." Clara felt tears blur her vision. "You reminded me that staying can be an act of courage," she replied. As night settled, lantern light glowing warmly through the windows, Blackridge stood no longer as a place of fear, but as proof that even the hardest hearts can change when met with patience, resilience, and truth. And high on that mountain, two lives once broken by loss found something stronger than survival. They found purpose. That if this story is pulling you in, if you feel the quiet strength of staying when it's easier to run, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Stories like this exist to remind us that even the coldest places can still be healed.